And here goes nothing. So slightly different setup tonight because the computer is not, the computer version of Facebook is not responding to the request to go live. So I'm having to do it with the phone. Hopefully this works. The image certainly looks nice and clear. Anyway, tonight we are talking about, hang on till I just get my act together here. Tonight we are talking about Scáthach and her training of Cuchulainn. This was suggested as a topic by Wooing of Gypsy, and I'm not sure if it's Caitlin or Cuchulainn Moon. Who is Scáthach? Scáthach is a very interesting shadowy character of mythology. Now the reason she's shadowy is because that's what her name actually means. So consulting the folklore, that is the old Irish English dictionary, we find that Scá, S-C-A-T-H, means phantasmal, tinted or shaded. She's a very shadowy character, as we are to find out. She features in a story called Tochmarc Emire, which means the Wooing of Emer, which is a story from the Ulster Cycle. Now, it's not central, as it were. It's not central to, or it's not a constituent part of Táin Bó Cuailnge, but is very much associated with same. Tochmarc Emire is found in actually various manuscripts in different recensions. A very handy summary of Tochmarc Emire is actually found on Wikipedia. Now, I wouldn't normally recommend Wikipedia as a scholarly source, but it seems whoever has written the summary for Wikipedia knows their stuff. Tochmarc Emire is one of the stories in the Ulster Cycle of Irish mythology, and one of the longest when it received its form in the second recension. It concerns the efforts of the hero Cuchulainn to marry Emer, who appears as his wife in other stories of the cycle, and his training in arms under the warrior woman Scáthach. And tonight we're going to do some reading and relate that story of how Scáthach trained Cuchulainn. The earliest version surviving is in Eleanor Hull, the Book of the Dun Cow, which I think is 11th century, but it's incomplete in that. It's also found in loads of manuscripts: Stowe D42, Rawlinson B512, Book of Fermoy 23E29, Egerton 92, Harley 5280, 23N10, which is one of the RIA, the Royal Irish Academy manuscripts, and the Book of Leinster. Anyway, a very useful summary. Let's just do some reading. I was going to say a very useful summary in terms of characters of Irish myth can be found in those dictionaries and encyclopedia that I spoke about last night. MacKillop's Oxford Dictionary of Celtic Mythology and Daithí O'Hogan's encyclopedia. So, again, reading from one of the popular works, Lady Gregory's. Well, this is a combined volume of her books, Gods and Fighting Men and Cuchulain of Muirthemne. Now, Cuchulain of Muirthemne is a retelling of Táin Bó Cuailnge and the Ulster Cycle. Now, I know there's a discussion that goes on about the reliability of Lady Gregory. I think that this is a reasonably faithful rendering of the tale, and an entertaining one at the same time. The problem with some of the scholarly translations is a lot of them were done, you know, a long time ago, in the 20th century and in some cases earlier, and the language can be a bit archaic and antiquated. So I propose tonight to read a little bit from Lady Gregory's work. Now, yeah, I should do, shouldn't I? And I should have had it prepared. I should very briefly read a summary of Scáthach from MacKillop. Scáthach, meaning shadow, shade, shelter, is an Amazonian warrior with otherworldly residences in Old Irish literature who teaches martial arts to Cuchulainn and other heroes. Some texts describe her as living in Alpi, which most commentators have understood as implying Alba, Scotland. Other texts link her specifically with the Hebridean island of Skye, which is then called Dún Scáthach. Cuchulainn completed his training under Scáthach, and from her he mastered his famous aggressive leap, the Tornchles, the Thunder Feet, and also received his spear, the Gay Bulga. In return, he aided her against her enemy Aoife, who may be Scáthach's double. She granted him 3 wishes: to continue to instruct him most carefully, to give him her daughter Ulhach, which means spectre, without paying the bride price, and to predict his future career. Accounts of Cuchulainn's amorous adventures with Scáthach vary. Usually he is seen as having gained the friendship of her thighs, which may derive from now forgotten sexual rites of warrior initiation. Earlier, while battling Aoife, he also slept with her, producing the son Conla, who would follow Cuchulainn back to Ireland in 7 years. Eventually, he battles this son in Eided Aenir Aoife, the tragic death of Aoife's only son, and I mentioned that in the first chapter of Island of the Setting Sun in relation to Baltray. Additionally, he also enjoys intimacies with Ulhach, Scáthach's daughter. Modern commentators see these sexual alliances as an indication not so much of Cuchulainn's lubriciousness as of the union of the apprentice with his heroic calling. Scáthach of the Ulster Cycle should probably be distinguished from Scáthach, daughter of Éanna, in the Fenian Cycle. She lulls Fionn McCool to sleep with magic music in her she. Anyway, that is MacKillop. And we're going to read tonight from... Oh, I'm forgetting that the comments are disappearing off the screen very quickly. Denise Russell, lovely story, I forgot. Well, hopefully we'll help you remember it. Gilles, is that Gilles in Biarritz in France? Good evening to you. I'm just wondering if I put this up on... Can I put the broadcast up on the computer screen here beside me so I can actually read the comments? Can I do that? Yeah, live here. Can I actually watch that? Well, it's a little bit behind. Okay, here we have some of the comments. Jacqueline Kennedy, good evening to you, Jacqueline, and welcome back. Good to see some of the regulars here. Story time, Andrew Kenny. Good evening, Andrew. And Caitlin Moon. She's one of my favourite figures. Yeah. Well, let's see if we can see why, if we can figure out why. With that, Forgal went out. Now we're understandably we're sort of starting off in the middle of a story here, so I may have to try and fill in some of the blanks for you afterwards. With that, Forgal went out to Eowyn, that's Eowyn Macha, with the appearance of a foreigner on him, and he gave out that he was sent by the King of Gaul to speak with Crohor, and to bring him a present of golden treasures, the wine of the Gaul, and many other things. And he brought some of his men with him, and there was a great welcome before them. And on the 3rd day, Cuchulainn and Conall and other chariot chiefs of Ulster were praised before him. And he said it was right for them to be praised, and that they did wonderful feats, and Cuchulainn above them all. And there's Nolan Proctor, who's saying hello from Pennsylvania. Kristen is in Chicago, where we're social distancing. Well, this is the perfect way to do it, on the other side of a computer screen, so we can't share any viruses if we have them. But he said that if Cuchulainn would go to Scáthach, the woman warrior that lived in the east of Alban, his skill would be more wonderful still, for he could not have perfect knowledge of the feats of a warrior without that. But his reason for saying this was that he thought if Cuchulainn set out, he would never come back again, through the dangers he would put around him on the journey, and through the wildness and the fierceness of the people about Scáthach. So Forgal had, as it were, ulterior motives for suggesting Cuchulainn go to train with Scáthach, because he assumed that Cuchulainn wouldn't make it back alive. So then Forgal went home, and Cuchulainn rose up in the morning and made ready to set out for Alban. And Lair Bojack, the battle winner, and Conall Cernach said they would go with him. But first Cuchulainn went across the plain of Brega to visit Emer. Now, the plain of Brega is the plain in which the great monuments of Brúna are situated in Meath, and to talk with her before going into the ship. And she told him how it was Forgal had gone to Eowyn, and had advised him to go and learn warriors' feats. the way they two might not meet again. Then each of them promised to be true to the other till they would meet again, unless death should come between them. And they said farewell to one another, and Cuchulainn turned towards Alban. So at this point in the tale, it is not clear whether Cuchulainn and Emer would ever see each other again. And Samantha Healy is saying hello. Federica is in northern Italy. Hello, Federica. I hope you're not too bored with the lockdown. And Jules Cousins, perfect bedtime story. Well, I hope you find it so. I hope it's, yes. Well, let's not give anything away, shall we? When they came there, they stopped for a while at the forge of Donal, the smith, and then they set out to go to the east of Alban. But before they had gone far, a vision came before their eyes of Owen Macha, and Lera and Connell were not able to pass by it, and they turned back. It was Forgal raised that vision to draw them away from Cuchulainn, that he might be in more danger being alone. Then Cuchulainn went on by himself on a strange road, and he was sad and tired and downhearted for the loss of his comrades. But he held to his word that he would not go back to Owen without finding Scáthach, even if he should die in the attempt. But now he was astray and ignorant, and not knowing which way to take, and he saw a terrible great beast like a lion coming towards him, and it watching him, but it did not try to harm him. Whatever way he went, the beast went before him, and then it stopped and turned its side to him. So he made a leap and was on its back, and he did not guide it, but went whatever way it chose. They travelled like that through 4 days, till they came to the end of the bounds of men, and to an island where lads were rowing out in a small loch, and the lads began to laugh when they saw a beast of that sort, and a man riding it. And then Cuchulainn leaped off, and the beast left him, and he bade it farewell. He passed on till he came to a large house in a deep valley, and a comely young girl in it, and she spoke to him, and bade him welcome. "A welcome before you, Cuchulainn," she said. He asked her how did she know him, and she said, "I was a foster child of Wulfkin the Saxon, the time you came there to learn sweet speech from him." And she gave him meat and drink, and he went away from her. Then he met with a young man, and he gave him the same welcome, and he said his name was Yochu, and they talked together, and Cuchulainn asked him what was the way to Scáthach's Dun, her fort. The young man told him the way across the plain of ill luck that lay before him. I love some of the names in these stories. And he said that on the near side of the plain the feet of men would stick fast, and on the far side every blade of grass would rise and hold them fast on its points. And he gave them a wheel, and bade him to follow its track across the one half of the plain. And he gave him an apple along with that, and bade him to throw it, and to follow the way it went, till he would reach the end of the plain. And he told him many other things that would happen him, and how he would win a great name at the last. And then each of them wished a blessing to the other, and Cuchulainn did as he bade him, and so he got across the plain and went on his journey. And then, as the young man had told him, he came to a valley, and it full of monsters, sent there by Forgal to destroy him, and only one narrow path through it. But he went through it safely, and after that his road led through a terrible wild mountain. Then he came to the place where Scáthach's scholars were, and among them he saw Ferdiad, son of Damon, and Naoise, Ainle, and Ardon, the 3 sons of Uisneach. That's another story that we will tell another night. The fate of the children of Uisneach, Deirdre and the children of Uisneach, or the sons of Uisneach. And when they knew that he was from Ireland, they welcomed him with kisses and asked for news of their own country. Well, that's the way us Irish are welcomed all around the world. He asked them where was Scáthach. "In that island beyond," they said. "What way must I take to reach her?" he asked. "By the bridge of the cliff," they said, "and no man can cross it till he has proved himself a champion, and many a king's son has got his death there." Now I see lots of comments. I'm going to pause for a moment to make sure I have them all. Oh, how do I see all of them? Oh, anyway. Hello from Florida. Kathleen O'Brien Ballum is in Florida. God bless anyone who reads Irish myths who has never sat in Irish class. Jacqueline Kennedy. Yes, very true. And Wilma is here to listen to the story that she suggested. Hello to you. Kirsten Salisbury is in Canada. Excellent. Well, good evening to you all. I hope you're enjoying yourselves. And I hope you're not too down in the dumps about the COVID-19 situation, which has led to these live readings to try and distract us from all that. And this is the way the bridge was. The two ends of it were low and the middle was high. And whenever anyone would leap on it, the first time it would narrow till it was as narrow as the hair of a man's head. And the second time it would shorten till it was short as an inch. And the third time it would get slippery till it was as slippery as an eel of the river. And the fourth time it would rise up on high against you till it was as tall as the mast of a ship. And Barb is in Florida. Good evening, Barb. Hello again. Sheila Murphy Weekly is in West Virginia. Big international audience tonight. You're all very welcome. All the warriors and people on the lawn came down to see Cuchulainn making his attempt to cross the bridge. And he tried 3 times to do it. And he could not. And the others were laughing at him that he should think he could cross it. And he so young. Then his anger came on him. Oh, be wary of Cuchulainn's anger. And the hero light shone around his head. That's very significant. And I've discussed that in Island of the Setting Sun, which is being reprinted in May. So keep your eyes out for that. And I mean, astronomically, it's interesting. The halo light. And it was not the appearance of a man that was on him, but the appearance of a god. And he leaped upon the end of the bridge and made the hero's salmon leap, so that he landed on the middle of it. And he reached the other end of the bridge before it could raise itself fully up, and threw himself from it, and was on the ground of the island where Scáthach's sunny house was, and it having 7 great doors, and 7 great windows between every 2 doors, and 3 times 50 couches between every 2 windows. Sounds like a palace. And 3 times 50 young girls, with scarlet cloaks and beautiful blue clothing on them, waiting on Scáthach. And Marie Hughes is in Montgomery County in Pennsylvania. I was in Pennsylvania in November. Penns Wood. Very, very nice part of the world. And Scáthach's daughter, Uachach, was sitting by a window. And when she saw the young man, and he a stranger, the comeliest of the men of Ireland, making his attempt to cross the bridge, she loved him. And her face and her colour began to change continually, so that now she would be as white as a little flower, and then again she would grow crimson red. And in her needlework that she was doing, she would put the gold thread where the silver thread should be, and the silver thread in the place where the gold thread should be. Now I want to interrupt at this juncture and suggest to you that that is an astronomical myth. That the changing of her colour from white to red represents the total eclipse of the moon, when the moon changes from white to red, and that the mixing of the silver and the golden threads is the fact that the moon's pathway through the sky is slightly inclined to the ecliptic or the sun's path. So if we imagine the moon's path as a silver thread and we imagine the sun's path as a golden thread, then occasionally they meet at 2 points in the sky. And when Scáthach saw that, she said, I think this young man has pleased you. And Uachach said, there would be great grief on me indeed, were he not to return alive to his own people, in whatever part of the world they may be. For I know there is surely someone to whom it would be great anguish to know the way he is now. Then, when Cuchulainn had crossed the bridge, he went up to the house and struck the door with the shaft of his spear so that it went through it. Talk about announcing your arrival. And when Scáthach was told that, she said, truly this must be someone who has finished his training in some other place. Then Uachach opened the door for him, and when he asked for Scáthach, and Uachach told him where she was, and what he had best do when he found her. So he went out to the place where she was teaching her 2 sons, Cur and Ketch, under the great yew tree. And he took his sword, and put its point between her breasts, and he threatened her with dreadful death if she would not take him as her pupil, and if she would not teach him all her own skill in arms. So she promised him she would do that. Talk about rolling over. I thought she'd lop his head off. Now it was while Cuchulainn was with Scáthach that a great king in Munster, Louis, son of Russ, went northwards with 12 chariot chiefs to look for a wife among the daughters of the men of Mac Russa, but they had all been promised before. And Kim says, greetings from Coeur Idaho, USA. Well, good evening to you, Kim. What time is it where you are? It's either 5:30 or maybe it's a little bit earlier. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe, oh yeah, it's earlier, isn't it? Idaho, yeah. And when Forgal Monarch heard this, he went to Owen, and he told Louis that the best of the maidens of Ireland, both as to form and behaviour and handiwork, was in his house unwed. Louis said he was well pleased, and Forgal promised him his daughter Emer in marriage. And to the 12 chariot chiefs that were with him, he promised 12 daughters of 12 lords of land in Brega. And Louis went back with him to his dun for the wedding. All good so far. But when Emer was brought to Louis to sit by his side, she laid one of her hands on each side of his face. And she said on the truth of her good name and of her life that it was Cuchulainn she loved, although her father was against him, and that no one that was an honourable man should force her to be his wife. Then Louis did not dare take her, for he was in dread of Cuchulainn, and so he returned home again. As to Cuchulainn, after he had been a good time with Scáthach, a war began between herself and Aoife, queen of the tribes that were round about. The armies were going out to fight, but Cuchulainn was not with them, for Scáthach had given him a sleeping drink that would keep him safe and quiet till the fight would be over, for she was afraid some harm would come to him if he met Aoife, for she was the greatest woman warrior in the world, and she understood enchantments and witchcraft. But after 1 hour, Cuchulainn started up out of his sleep, for the sleeping drink that would have held any other man for a day and a night held him only for that length of time. And he followed after the army, and he met with the 2 sons of Scáthach, and they 3 went against the 3 sons of Ilswanach, 3 of the best warriors of Aoife, and it was by Cuchulainn they were killed, one after the other. On the morning of the morrow, the fight was begun again, and the 2 sons of Scáthach were going up the path of feats to fight against the 3 others of the best champions of Aoife, Kira, Birra and Blochna, sons of Enkin. When Scáthach saw them going up, she gave a sigh, for she was afraid for her 2 sons. But just then Cuchulainn came up with them, and he leaped before them on the path of feats, and met the 3 champions, and all 3 fell by him. Samantha is waving from Scotland, from Alba. Perhaps you know the Isle of Skye, the Isle of Scáthach. When Aoife saw that her best champions were after being killed, that's a funny Irish way of saying things, an Irish way of using English. Instead of saying when her best champions had been killed, were after being killed, she challenged Scáthach to fight against herself. But Cuchulainn went out in her place, and before he went, he asked Scáthach, "What things does Aoife think most of in all the world?" "Her 2 horses and her chariot driver," said Scáthach. And Jan is in Lower Saxony, Malta. Malte. Okay. Good evening, Jan. You're very welcome. Or is it Jan? Please correct me if I'm wrong. So then Cuchulainn and Aoife attacked one another and began a fierce fight. And she broke Cuchulainn's spear in pieces, and his sword she broke off at the hilt. Then Cuchulainn called out, "Look, the chariot and the horses and the driver of Aoife are fallen down into the valley and are lost." At that Aoife looked about her, and Cuchulainn took a sudden hold of her and lifted her on his shoulders and brought her down to where the army was, and laid her on the ground and held his sword to her breast, and she begged for her life, and he gave it to her. And after that she made peace with Scáthach, and bound herself by sureties not to go against her again. And she gave her love to Cuchulainn, and out of that love great sorrow came afterwards. The aforementioned what is the name of it? I did something Aoife. the story of the death of Aoife's only son, that the name of which I can't remember offhand. And as Cuchulainn was going home by the narrow path, he met an old hag, and she blind of the left eye. She asked him to leave room for her to pass by, but he said there was no room on that path unless he would throw himself down the great sea cliff that was on the one side of it. But she asked him again to leave the road to her, and he would not refuse, and he dropped down the cliff with only the one hand keeping a hold of the path. Then she came up, and as she passed him, she gave a hit of her foot at his hand, the way he would leave his hold and drop into the sea. But at that, he gave a leap up again onto the path and struck off the hag's head. For she was Enchin, the mother of the last 3 warriors that had fallen by him, and it was to destroy him she had come out to meet him, for she knew that under his rules of championship he would make way for her when she asked it. After that, he stayed for another while with Scáthach until he had learned all the arts of war and all the feats of a champion. And then a message came to him to come back to his own country, and he bade her farewell. And Scáthach told him what would happen to him in the time to come, for she had the druid gift. Imbas forasni, I presume, and she told him there were great dangers before him, and that he would have to fight against great armies, and he alone, and that he would scatter his enemies, so that his name would come again to Alban, but that his life would not be long, for he would die in his full strength. Then Cuchulainn went on board his ship to set out for Ireland, and in the same ship with him were Luiri and Lune, the 2 sons of Loch, and Ferbai, and Larin, and Ferdiad, and Durst, son of Jerub. On the night of Samhain they came to the island of Rechran, and Cuchulainn left his ship and came to the strand. And there he heard a sound of crying, and he saw a beautiful young girl, and she sitting there alone. He asked her who she was, and what ailed her, and she said she was Devergil, daughter of the king of Rechran, and that every year he was forced to pay a heavy tax to the Fomor. We were talking about the Fomorians and their taxes on the Tuatha Danann in episode 1, I think it was. And this year, when he could not pay it, they made him leave her there near the sea till they would come and bring her away in place of it. Where do these men come from? Said Cuchulainn. From that far country over there, she said, and let you not stop here, or they will see you when they come. But Cuchulainn would not leave her, and presently 3 fierce men of the Fomor landed in the bay, and made straight for the spot where the girl was. But before they had time to lay a hand on her, Cuchulainn leapt on them, and killed the 3 of them, one after the other. Well, there you go, he's not afraid. The last man wounded in the arm, and the last man wounded him in the arm, and the girl tore a strip from her dress, and gave it to him to bind round the wound. And then she ran to her father's house and told him all that had happened. After that, Cuchulainn came to the king's house like any other guest, and his companions with him, and Conall Cernach and Lera Buadach were there before them, where they had been sent from Owen Macha to collect tribute, for at that time a tribute was paid to Ulster from the islands of the Gauls. Very interesting. Basically, the Scots were being taxed by the Irish. But sure, of course, the Scots were Irish anyway, weren't they? So, effectively, that is really where Scáthach's part in the tale ends. In Tochmarc Emire, the Wooing of Emer, and indeed in the wider Táin Bó Cuailnge myth. However, before we go on, or before we sort of finish, I should say a few things. Just something I want to say about, very specifically about Cuchulainn's spear, which wasn't just mentioned there, but is mentioned a little bit further on, and that is Cuchulainn had a magic spear which was called the Gae Bulga, Gaebulga, or various spellings thereof. And it was supposedly Scáthach that gave the spear to Cuchulainn. In the genealogy of the Éireann, it is said that the god Bulga, otherwise called Ailil Éireann, was the inventor of the missile spear. In the Ulidian tales, that is, the Ulster Cycle, we find the spear of Bulga in Gaebulga in the possession of Cuchulainn, who had obtained it in the other world from the goddess Scáthach, or from Aoife, her double. Now, the source for that is Tochmarc Emire. As I said, if, the Wooing of Emer is told in several manuscripts. The earliest one in Laura Nahira, the Book of the Dun Cow, is incomplete. Yeah, what's really interesting to me about this, if I do skip on a few pages, if I can find where I was now, and I can, it says this. This is about his weaponry. And as to Cuchulainn's sword that was hanging alone with the shield, its name was the Cúchulainn Ciarán, that is, the hard-headed. And it had a hilt of gold with ornaments of silver. And if the point of the sword would be bent back to its hilt, it would come as straight as a rod back again. It would cut a hair on the water, or it would cut a hair off the head without touching the skin. Or it would cut a man in two, and the one half of him would not miss the other for some time after. And as to Cuchulainn's spear, the gay bullock, whether it was or was not kept in the speckled house, very interesting, speckled, I always think of starry. This is the way he came by it. There were two monsters fighting in the sea one time. The Courage and the Cuoinge were their names were, and at last the Cuoinge made for the strand to escape, but the other followed him and killed him there. So there were two monsters who were fighting in the sea, and one killed the other on the strand. Then Bullock, son of Boyne, a champion of the eastern part of the world, found the bones of the Cuoinge on the strand, and he made a spear with them. And he gave it to a great fighting man, the son of Jubar, and it went from one to another till it came to the woman champion Aoife. And Aoife gave it to Cuchulainn, and he brought it to Ireland. And it was with it he killed his own son and his friend Ferdia afterwards. I find that really interesting, because the barbed spear was supposedly made from the bones of a monster that had washed up on the beach. And that reminds me a little bit about the ancient story from the Dinshenachus about the monster called Mata that was supposedly killed and dismembered either by the Dagda or by the men of Ireland or by the men of Ulster, depending on which version you read, and dismembered and cast into the River Boyne. And some of its chunks, its bits and pieces, made their way along the river and out to sea and formed landscape features on their way. And his rib cage ended up at Dublin, the ford of the Hurdles, Clia, which is where apparently the old name of Dublin comes from, is the rib cage of the monster Mata that floated down from the Boyne along the sea and into the Liffey. I always found that very interesting, you know, that that story, to me, the story of the Mata, is a creation myth. And if you want to read more about that, I say quite a lot about it in my book, Mythical Ireland, New Light on the Ancient Past. In terms of sources, like Lady Gregory, you can get her collection of complete Irish mythology on the internet in bookshops. I have come across lots of second-hand copies of this, and very, very cheap. In fact, in the past couple of years, every time I find a second-hand copy, I mean, I'm talking about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 euros, I buy it and I give it to a friend, just someone who might be interested in reading the myths. So contained in this is, you know, stories of the Tuatha Dé Danann and stories of the Fianna, and of course Cuchulain of Muirthemne is basically a retelling of the Ulster Cycle and Táin Bó Cuailnge. But if you're interested in some other sources for same, one very, very popular translation of Táin Bó Cuailnge, of course, is by Thomas Kinsella, probably the most famous of the modern translations. And I'm just going to read a very, very short bit of this. I'm conscious of the fact that I don't want to be reading large tracts of material that is under copyright, so I want to stick to the fair use clause. He stayed with Donal and was taught first the pierced flagstone with the bellows blowing under it. He performed on it till his soles were blackened and discoloured. Next, the hero's coil on the spikes of spears, climbing up along a spear and performing on its point without making his soles bleed. This is part of Cuchulainn's training. Finally, Donal told Cuchulainn his training wouldn't be finished until he visited Scáthach, further east in Alba, so he travelled across Alba. Cuchulainn's road took him to the camp where Scáthach's pupil lodged. He asked where she might be. On that island there, they said. How can I get to her? By the pupil's bridge, they said. And of course, nobody could cross it unless he was trained in arms. And again, a description of how the bridge changed each time you jumped on it. 3 times Cuchulainn tried to cross the bridge, but his best efforts failed, and the men jeered him. Then he went into his warp spasm. He stepped to the head of the bridge and gave his hero's salmon leap onto the middle. He reached the far end of the bridge so quickly it had no time to fly up at him. Then he sprang off onto the solid ground of the island and went up to the fort. He struck the gate with his spear point and broke through it. Scáthach was told about this. Plainly, she said, this is someone who has had his full training somewhere else. So you can see that Lady Gregory's translation is in fact pretty faithful. Another one that I forgot to put on the desk, I have to be careful not to knock the phone. Thought I took it down earlier. Hang on a second. Oh, it's there. I couldn't see it. Is translated, a more recent translation by Ciarán Carson. Now, sadly, Ciarán Carson passed away, I think, last year in 2019. Penguin Classics, an imprint of Penguin books, published, what year was this published? 2007. Yeah, so it's actually 13 years ago. But that's another very, very lovely translation of Táin Bó Cuailnge. Just want to make sure that his training is in there. Boyhood Deeds. I'm sure it is. Is there an index? No, there isn't. Okay. But anyway, there's another very popular translation of Táin Bó Cuailnge. Ah, yes. So, a very scholarly work on early Irish history and mythology is by T.F. O'Reilly. And this was published by the School of Celtic Studies in the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. And I just wanted to briefly mention what I was talking about earlier on, Imbus Forestny. The phrase Imbus Forestny must originally have referred to the inspired wisdom of the seer. Cormac, however, as we have seen, applies the name to a particular rite practiced by the seer, but it is unlikely that he had a first-hand acquaintance with the rite he describes. And when he tells us that the diviner chants over his palms and puts his palms on his cheeks before going to sleep, he is probably influenced by his fanciful etymology of imbas, which he derives from imb and bus or bas, palm. He also mentions tenim leja and implies that it was another method of divination, but does not give any account of it beyond suggesting that it involved offerings to demons. So why did I refer to this? Because in note 3, the mention in Cormac and elsewhere of Finn chanting through Tenim Leja would suggest that the writers misunderstood it to mean supernatural inspiration. So one hears of utterances through Imbus Forestny. Finn twice speaks Triasa Nimbus Forestny, and Scáthach prophesies Tria Imbus Forestny in Tochmarc Emire, and that's what I mentioned earlier. So I knew when I mentioned Imbus Forestny, I would have to get you a reference for that. Anyway, if you're interested in more scholarly study of early Irish mythology, that's a very good volume, and I'm still reading that. Pick it up every so often, and always have a pencil and I'm underlining sections. Laurie wants to know, what did he say? Who are we talking about, Laurie? I didn't understand the question. Karen Smith is watching from Cumbria in England, just across the water. Hello to you and very good evening. And there's a reason that I've picked up A Literary History of Ireland by Douglas Hyde. Many of you will know this name. Douglas Hyde was the first president of Ireland. But before that, no man did more than Douglas Hyde, 1860 to 1949, member of a Protestant Anglo-Irish planter family, to further the causes of Irish nationalism and the Irish language. His work established him as a formidable leader of Irish opinion, and he may be regarded as a moving spirit behind the Irish intellectual revolution of the early 20th century and the fight for political autonomy. In his introduction to this new edition, Professor O'Keefe gives an admirable account of Hyde's career both as a scholar and statesman. After 1915, Hyde devoted himself as Professor of Modern Irish at University College Dublin to his academic and literary pursuits. His election as President of Ireland in 1938 was a fitting culmination to his life's work. Samantha, could you please advise the title author of the first book you are reading from and the other titles as well? Okay, I thought I had done, but I will recap. You mean the very, very first? That was from James MacKillop's Oxford Dictionary of Celtic Mythology. I spoke about this yesterday in episode 2. An invaluable book for anybody interested in Irish mythology. I know it's a dictionary and it's arranged alphabetically. It is a fabulous primer and you will not regret it. I bought this hardback copy in a book in Glastonbury in England last year for £12. But you can get paperback versions of it secondhand. I buy a lot of books secondhand on the internet. You could probably get them for a £5, if not a £10. An absolutely invaluable resource. And then the main retelling was from Lady Gregory's. Well, this is, I mean, her work is published and republished, so it's available in many different forms. In fact, I might be able to show you. Okay, maybe that wasn't. I know I have at least one other of these there with a different cover on it. It's in this case, it's Lady Gregory's Complete Irish Mythology. Now, there are 2 volumes in that. One is Gods and Fighting Men, and the other is Cuchulain of Muirthemne. You're best to get the 2 in one rather than get them singly, because, well, it's better value, isn't it? And I forgot to mention... Two more when we're on the Táin, and we will come back to the Táin, of course, because Tochmarc Emire, as I said, is almost like a little bit of a sideline to the Táin. Sorry, I'm getting carried away here. I have to get back to Hyde, but anyway. Yeah, a very, very authoritative and excellent translation of Táin Bó Cuailnge is by Cecile O'Rahilly, and that is... published again by the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. Táin Bó Cuailnge Recension 1. And the wonderful thing about this work is it's got the Irish version and then the English translation. So you can actually at all times keep an eye on the Irish words. Some time ago in 2019, I bought this beautiful hardback and beautifully printed and illustrated first edition, I believe it is, Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster by Eleanor Hull, and that was published in MCMIX Millennium 1909, isn't it? MCMIX. I'm terribly sorry, but my Roman numerals aren't that good. Yeah, 1909 with 16 illustrations in colour. How Cuchulainn took arms. I wonder if this... Well, just check anyway, just in case any of you... this is costly, by the way. You don't get these cheap. This cost me... I'm going to whisper so the wife doesn't hear me. €48. Yeah, I'm pretty sure... If his taking of arms is in it, maybe his training is in it. Brown Bull of Cooley. Cuchulainn's Wooing. Yeah, well, Tochmarc Emire is in there. It has to be included in the story, you know. You can't leave Tochmarc Emire out of Táin Bó Cuailnge. You really can't. Cuchulainn in Shadowland. I wonder, is that, yeah, Scá or Shadow. Yeah, so that's in there as well. Anyway, back to Hyde, because I got completely distracted there. Could you perhaps write the titles and authors down? I'm particularly interested in the scholarly work. Of course, yeah. I'll do that after I'm finished. I'll post it in the comments for those of you who are interested. No problem at all. I'd be glad to do that. I also want to, before I finish, draw attention to the fact that if you want to support my work, I would be very glad if you became a patron of Mythical Ireland at patreon.com/Mythical Ireland, or if you just want to make a donation, there is a donation page on my website which I'm just pasting into the comments on the video now, so you can see it there. And if you become a patron, you get rewarded, and there are different levels of reward. So currently the $10 a month patrons have access to a video that's over an hour long, which talks about the mythology and alignments of the Boyne Valley. Patrons at the $5 and above have access to podcast number 11, which hasn't been made public and won't be for a while. So the patrons get early and exclusive access to stuff. Yes. Oh yeah, well, this is just a retelling of Scáthach. And again, I suppose this reinforces the genuine nature of the authenticity of Lady Gregory's translation, because it's basically the same, you know. Wonderful, says the saga, was the sight that bridge afforded when anyone would leap upon it, for it narrowed until it became as narrow as the hair of one's head, and the second time it shortened till it became as short as an inch, and the third time it grew slippery until it was slippery as an eel of the river. So you can see it's exactly the same. All the warriors and people on the lawn came down to see Cuchulainn attempting to cross this bridge. In the meantime, Scáthach's Grianán, or sunny house, is described. It had 7 doors, and 7 great windows between every 2 doors of them, and thrice 50 couches between every 2 windows of them, and thrice 50 handsome marriageable girls. So there you go, and that is Douglas Hyde's literary history of Ireland. So I'll try my best to post all those as a comment afterwards with links to all the scholarly work. Maybe I should, just before we go, have a look at Scáthach in Daithí Ó Hógán's work, just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Lee is in Pennsylvania. Good evening, Lee. Very nice of you to join us. Okay. Let me see if Hógán has something about Scáthach. If he hasn't, well and good, but sure, what of it? And he hasn't. Yeah. So that's one thing I would say about the MacKillop dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, versus Ó Hógán. Ó Hógán has some very comprehensive articles about various deities, figures of mythology, Christian era characters, historical characters, etc. But it's not maybe as comprehensive in that it's not as wide-ranging. MacKillop, I think, is a much more complete dictionary, or it's not really a glossary, because a glossary, you know, is just terminology, but it's much more comprehensive. Anyway, so if there are any questions, I'll take questions. As you can see, Scáthach is an interesting character, because it seems that in the story of Cuchulainn, he is I suppose not completely ready to take part in the great war that's to come until he has gone to Alba and until he has trained with Scáthach. That much is implicit in the tale. She's like an otherworldly guide for him, you know. She's almost like a sort of a phantom mother of sorts, you know. And of course, Aoife, who is her I suppose you could nearly call her sort of her equal mirror image, like her evil twin or something like that. eventually gets Cuchulain's love, and they produce a child together. The whole thing is a little bit interesting because it sort of takes Cuchulainn away from Ireland. And of course, Forgal's attempt is full of guile and threat. Well, not threat, danger for Cuchulainn. The reason he sends him away is because he pretends that he thinks Cuchulainn would benefit from the training of Scáthach. But in reality, the reason he's sending him away is because he hopes that he doesn't return alive. Now, if you haven't read Táin Bó Cuailnge, I'm not going to spoil it for you because there's a lot more to the story. Cuchulainn does return to Ireland. Scáthach kind of spoiled it for us there a little bit because she did give us an indication as to what might happen to him. And anyway, before I leave, I should say to you that this is an effort to try and distract us a little bit from the restrictions around COVID-19 or the coronavirus. It's an idea that came into my head a couple of days ago that perhaps, given that I'm going to be spending a lot of time at home, and some of you guys are as well, it might be just nice for us to delve into some of the old Irish myths and to talk about them. I'm not a scholar, I am not an academic, I have no qualifications in any of this stuff. I'm an enthusiast like many of you. I'm not an expert with an encyclopedic knowledge. In fact, if you had asked me to talk about Scáthach tonight without reference to the books, I doubt that I could have told you very much. I'll do my very best when you suggest a personage or a topic for discussion to research that topic before I come on air the next time. So today I did take the time to look through the books and try and find relevant material for Scáthach because I'm not just quite comfortable talking about her. But of course this opens up many avenues, and I'm hoping that we can open up many more in the days and weeks that are coming ahead. Hopefully they'll find a cure for coronavirus very quickly, that we won't be here for weeks. But anyway. Samantha Gonzalez says Scáthach is a very interesting, a mother, a warrior, and even a seer. Yes, I agree with you. She has sort of very interesting facets. She's goddess-like, and she's sort of a little bit witch-like, but at the same time she almost has that sort of maternal instinct, as if she's watching Cuchulainn's back and she's protecting him, you know. I mean, when he threatens her at sword point to say, I want to become your pupil and you bloody better. Given that she was skilled in training warriors, she could have lopped off his head with a sword there and then. Ciara Lynch asks, any idea the period that Cuchulainn might have been set? Now there is a can of worms. If you want the scholarly opinion on that, the very best book you can read right now is by Jim Mallory, and it's called In Search of the Irish Dreamtime, Archaeology and Early Irish Literature. And there's also a very good book by archaeologist John Waddell. I know I said archaeologist, an archaeologist writing about mythology. Yeah, I don't know where all my books are exactly. Put my hand to them. Yeah, I can't put my hand on it right now. But John Waddell has a very good book. Perhaps I'll get a chance to talk to you about that either tomorrow or in a forthcoming broadcast. But he was an archaeologist who wanted to know, you know, is there anything in mythology that ties in with archaeological sites? In terms of the age of the myths, the difficulty is that, you know, we're told in all the works about the Irish language, and I'm trying to catch up on that too, because that's an area that I wasn't really taught in school very much. Writing was really introduced to the island of Ireland by the Christian monks in the monasteries. Now we know that language was spoken in Ireland in pre-Christian times and in prehistory. There's no way that people could have come together to build great monuments like Brú na Bóinne and the late Neolithic landscape there, the monument complex there, without having some sort of a language to communicate with each other. We're told that that was Indo-European, or what's called PIE, Proto-Indo-European. And that's a subject that we might treat in a separate broadcast. Some scholars have suggested, and I think that's maybe Mallory's slant, although I have to refamiliarise myself with that work, that Táin Bó Cuailnge is an Iron Age myth. But in fact, there are aspects of it that go all the way back into antiquity. And I'll give you an example of that. At the culmination, well, the reason for the Táin Bó Cuailnge, the reason for the war, and the reason for the whole thing starting off in the first place, is because Queen Maeve in Connacht owned what she thought was the finest bull in all Ireland, which is the white bull, the Finbenach. But in the pillow talk one night, while they were in bed together, her husband Eileal said to her, well, you know, there's actually a better bull in Cooley, and he's called Dun Cuailnge, the brown bull of Cooley. And that actually set off the whole thing. There ended up being this huge war because Maeve threatened the people of Cooley that she was going to take the bull, and of course the Ulstermen and Cuchulainn weren't going to stand for this. The culmination of the story is the battle between the two bulls, and in the battle what happens is Finbenach and Dun Cuailnge fight to the death. Dun Cuailnge picks up the Finbenach on his horns and dismembers him and drops his bits in various parts of Ireland. So Luan, I think, is the ford of the loins. Trim in County Meath is the ford of the liver, where the beast's liver fell off. There's a place near Dundalk in County Louth called Loch an Tarav and Drum Tarav, which is after the Lake of the Bull and the Ridge of the Bull where he pawed up the earth. This is the Dun Cuailnge. And that, the dismemberment of a monster or a beast and the dropping of its bits to form landscape features, we met only a short time ago in the story of the Mata, which is also another very early creation myth, in my opinion. And I think we're talking at least Neolithic. We may actually be talking pre-Neolithic here. In his great work about world mythology, Witzel talks about the dismemberment of the dragon or the beast or the monster being anything up to 20,000 years old. Really fascinating stuff. So some scholars try to date the Táin through the dress and the description of the weaponry. Of course, you know, if, for instance, we thought it was a Neolithic myth, then how does it have swords in it? How does it have chariots and chariot wheels in it before the wheel was invented? So the thinking is in some camps that what happened was that, you know, the story was written in the language of the time in which it was written down and in the milieu of the time it was written down, you know. But clearly there are aspects of it that are very antiquated. They are very, very ancient. I believe that the tearing asunder of the monster is one of them. And Irene says that's Rathcrohan, the fight of the bulls. Yes, indeed. Rathcrohan in Roscommon is a great site. Take a look at it. Yeah. And I must do, because I'm heavily focused on the Boyne Valley region, which is my home region, and which is where I spend a lot of my time researching. If there are any other questions, I'd be very glad to take them. If not, we can end episode 3 and we can look forward to episode 4, just to let you know what's coming up. I haven't decided what episode 4 will be about just yet, but other suggestions that have been made so far are Boyne, the goddess, who gives her name to the Boyne. That is something I want to talk quite a lot about. I'm preparing my sources for that, so that'll be in coming days. Somebody wants me to talk about Queen Maeve, who got a bit of a mention there this evening. Somebody wants me to talk about Finn, although you could fill several hours. In fact, you could fill hundreds of hours talking about Finn. But we'll see what we can do in terms of talking about Finn. Maureen O'Leary wanted me to talk about Scáthach. Now, Scáthach is someone I don't know much about, but I will do a bit of research, so it could be next week before we get round to Scáthach. Somebody wants me to do a piece about Morrigu, which I'd be very glad to do. Somebody else wants me to talk about Bridget. We mentioned Bridget, was it last night or the night before? It might have been episode 1, the first night. Somebody else has suggested St. Patrick and the Snakes. Very interesting area of discussion. And somebody else has mentioned the Cailleach, and like Finn, there are stories galore about the Cailleach. Her stories would fill many volumes. Anyway, very good evening to you all. I'm very glad to have, had you along this evening. And I hope that we can do this. Well, certainly I'm hoping to do it every day for the time being until this crisis passes. Don't forget to drop a comment below. The video will be available afterwards in case you haven't been able to join us for the live feed. The video will be available afterwards. I will also upload a copy of the video to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Mythical Ireland. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoy your Saturday night, and I hope that you all have a great St. Patrick's week, even though there's going to be no parades this year. It's unprecedented. It's a strange situation. Perhaps that's the day we should be talking about St. Patrick and the snakes. There's loads and loads of stuff to talk about. There's more than enough to keep us chatting for months to come, and I mean that wholeheartedly. I've been studying this stuff for over 20 years, and I genuinely feel that I have only begun to scratch the surface of it. That is how truly rich and wealthy Irish mythology is. It is a fabulous repository of ancient stories. We are so lucky to have it, and so it's my great pleasure to do this. And hopefully, as I said, you can join us tomorrow. Keep an eye out early in the day. I usually make a decision about what time I'm going to broadcast at. I give an Irish time and I give an Eastern Standard Time for the States, because I know a lot of you are watching from the States. I don't generally give European times, but I know you're just an hour or two ahead of us, most of you. In the meantime, as Kristen says, Gora Mahagot, Gora Mahagiv, Agus Iha Ma, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. Slán agus Bannacht.